Welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, hosted by Mark Vena, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hello, my name is Mark Vena, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Thursday, December 23rd, 2021, just a couple of days before Christmas rolls around. I hope all of you will be celebrating the holidays with your friends and families. Joining me for today's pre-Christmas podcast are my regular two stalwart tech journalists, Rob Pegoraro, who writes frequently on tech policy for Wirecutter, PC Magazine, and USA Today, John Quain, who writes for the New York Times, Smart Cities, and Tom's Guide. And unfortunately, Stuart Walpin had the audacity to actually be traveling right now for his, I think he's going down to see his in-laws, so we pray for him. That will go well. But Stuart writes for Twice, US News, and Investopedia. Gentlemen, happy holidays, and how are all of you?
Very good. Ho, ho, ho.
I see, John, you're in the Christmas spirit. You got the nice tree in the background. And I'm sure there's is there some Christmas spirits in that?
No, I wish it was eggnog, but it's just coffee, unfortunately.
Okay, well, hey, I won't tell the hundreds of thousands of people that watch our podcast. Rob, how are you? You look like you're.
I'm well. Yep, I am at the in-laws. I would have a Christmas tree in the backdrop, but that would guarantee that Buddy the dog would show up. And while he's pretty cute, he's not much of a tech policy or technology expert in general.
Well, you guys got to download this that app I mentioned to you, that XSplit VCam. That's what I'm using right now. I'm not using a green screen, and it really is terrific. I mean, so we don't have to do the prism wall setting that you appear to like.
Well, I could come up with various trick backgrounds. I mean, I've got options here if I can figure out how to use this app.
You're in Northern California. You're in the
not far from you. Correct. I'm in the North Bay.
John, you got any special plans? Are you hanging out in New York, or what are you doing?
I'm hanging out in New York for this part of the holiday, then spending part of it up in the country at my house in the country, and then the question is, not to give away anything, what do I do come the new year, which we'll get to.
Well, I literally just got an email from not Showstoppers, the Pepcom guys, that said they're moving forward with Pepcom, so Pepcom's going to happen. But we'll talk about it later when we get into the thing. But it's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. People are just kind of dropping out, one by one. But CES is going to happen. They're not going to cancel CES. There might be 12 people there, but it's going to. I think it's going to happen.
But one's for the buffet.
That's exactly right. Well, let's get to our topics right off the bat here. This is a really interesting one. Apple announced a new version of iOS 15.2. It has this very cool, well, I won't say cool because I want to get your opinions on it, but an interesting feature that both Facebook and Google have had for many, many moons. And that is a digital legacy feature. I just wrote about it on Forbes yesterday, which allows you to provide the ability to provide people with access to your phone for, God forbid, you pass on. We're all going to pass on at some point. And you can, have that person who you identify, or a group of people up to 5, get access to the contents on your phone on Apple iCloud. And it's interesting. And I guess the question is, because I know there's a lot of secrets on your phone, Rob, all those poems.
Yeah, actually, it's a brand new phone, so really not.
And you're smart enough not to put that stuff in the cloud. But and I know there's a lot of secret poems to the Washington Redskins that you don't want the public to see after you pass on. But I want to just start with you. What's your thoughts about just the concept? Because people don't, I write about this in my Forbes piece, that, people don't think about it. They think they're going to live forever, hey, and you don't really give a lot of thought to, hey, there's a lot of stuff on my phone that I would like to have a loved one have access to, whether it's, family photos, images, other content. But I want to ask that question to each of you first, just the appropriateness of enabling that capability. So what's your thoughts, Rob?
Well, if we assume the user is not, in fact, immortal, then you're going to need something like this. And I have occasionally gotten emails from readers who have had a loved one die, and they didn't have the password saved anywhere, and they just want to know, how can I get at the pictures that my dad, my son, whoever took, And it's really rough to be able to have to tell these folks there's nothing you can do. And so now Apple has added that feature. And yes, unless you are in fact immortal, in which case, what's your secret? And do you get bored that way? You should probably enable this feature.
Well, there is. Oops, we had a little interference there. Pre 15.2, Apple would let you. You could appeal to Apple and get a court order. Which is a completely different ball game. I mean, for most
piece of cake, right?
Yeah, that's not exactly. That's not like getting your driver's license done at the DMV. So it's a very laborious process, like you said. But is it something you've done personally, Rob? I mean, have you done it with your phone? So you haven't done it. But and I'll get back to you in a second on why you haven't done it. But let me pose that question to John.
Yeah. Well, I'm playing in the Singularity. I'm going to be uploaded to my desktop computer. So, I'm going to be around for a long time. So I definitely don't want people messing around with that. Me and Kurzweil. But seriously, I haven't done it either. It's we're kind of a crossover generation, half digital, half analog. So a lot of people I know are going through their parents' things, the boxes of stuff in the attic. I mean, that's a typical thing to do. And this is sort of the digital version of doing the box of stuff in the attic. And I think it is a smart thing to do, to find one person or two people that you trust in case something happens, and then they can get access, sort of like the executor on your will, right?
Right. Right.
It's the exact same thing, and I think it's a good idea. Have I done it? No, but don't do as I do. Do as I say.
Thank you for that sage advice, John. What's interesting? Google. I don't know what Facebook does, but I suspect they do something similar. You can be very selective about what data you choose to pass on. I mean, Google, you can go into settings, and this is whether it's for a Gmail account or whatever, but you can be very surgical in terms of what data you pass on. The problem with Apple's implementation, and they may change this over time, is that it's an all or nothing deal. I mean, you pretty much get the keys of the kingdom, and I think that will give people some pause, frankly, versus, hey, believe it or not, and I cite this in my article, more than half the population doesn't have a will because they think they're going to live forever, and this is, to me, I think, an extension of that phenomenon a bit. But if Apple, just using them as the example, if they employed a technique that allowed you to be very surgical in terms of, okay, my family pictures, family albums, very, very, you're being very prescriptive of what data you allow to get access after you die. Would that make it more appealing to you, Rob?
So the only reason why I haven't set it up is because I use an Android phone. So I do have an iPad mini, and I just got around to installing 15.2 or whatever on it the other day. Did not take it with me on this trip. But yes, I do have, emergency contact set and various other services. So yes, if I were to shuffle off this mortal coil, my wife, my family would not be without recourse to get my stuff.
And John, is the all or nothing part of Apple's approach, is that a deal breaker for you?
It would be a deal breaker for me, I think. Yeah. I'm not an Apple aficionado. I have Apple products and stuff that I test, obviously. But again, like Rob, I'm an Android phone user. That's, when I switch phones, which is, many times a year I'll switch phones, but they all tend to be Android, Windows PCs. There's a heterogeneous group of equipment that I use. So where do I back that up? So, I have multi-terabyte drives. That might be the most useful. But yeah, all or nothing is a bit much. It's like, if my photographs, maybe my emails, in case you need to find something, that I have a box somewhere full of, jewelry that they want or something. But yeah, I'm not sure about everything.
Yeah. And that's the thing that gives me major pause, for a whole bunch of different reasons. But we'll see. Apple, if anything, they do change their mind, and they'll never acknowledge that they did this in the first, which is classic
Right.
Apple. Let us talk about. Let me get to the next slide here. Let's talk about. This is my second Apple topic. This is really intriguing to me, and I got to get your reaction. It's been a bad week for Apple. The SEC, that vaunted regulatory agency, they've rejected Apple's bid to block shareholder proposals that would have forced Apple to kind of confront the forced labor issues they have. And most recently, just I think it was a day ago, NDA transparency. So when they settle, let's say, for example, they have an employee that leaves the company and they decide to pay them a settlement of money, that employee has to sign an NDA. And by the way, this is not unique. It's not unique to Apple. Many companies do this, but the person who receives that settlement is obligated, obviously, not to divulge details of the settlement itself. And Apple has had some interesting dismissals of employees for whatever reasons. So, want to get your reaction to that. I mean, the forced labor one actually sticks in my claw a bit because Apple, claims to be the company that is the champion of human rights, and the lack of transparency, I think, bothers a lot of shareholders. But let me ask Rob what your reaction to both these components are.
It's a bad look for Apple. So on the one hand, they have actually tried to, speak for the workers at various contract manufacturers and try to ensure they have good working conditions. It's been an industry-wide problem. They have at least recognized that they had a problem a little earlier than others. So why they would then draw the line at this? And same thing with NDAs. And the other thing is, I mean, if they have to accept these shareholder votes, they're probably going to win. Shareholder democracy is kind of a myth in practice. It's really, really rare when you get something like Exxon having a dissident slate of directors actually getting elected against the wishes of management. Most of the time, it's like a Soviet election where, unless you get some institutional shareholders who will say, no, management is wrong, management is going to get its way on these initiatives.
And that's, by the way, that's not specific to Apple. That's specific to every shareholder vote for public companies. Right. Generally go the way that management asks the shareholders to vote.
Right.
So, John, your take?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Although it's kind of a not a debatable issue for Apple and for most companies these days. I mean, this is something that you have to do nowadays. I mean, it's just the world has changed and they have a responsibility for that. As if they want to be citizens of the world, then they're going to have to look at the policies and the companies that they hire to make some of their products or stuff. And that's just a thing. The NDA issue is a thorny one. I mean, the famous case I think of is the guy who worked for Microsoft out in Hawaii, moved to Hawaii. And he was just doing, what we regard as just sales of products, not a big deal. Hardly anything secret about that. But he was under an NDA and he could not do anything for I can't remember, a year after. Well, what do you do in Hawaii? There aren't a lot of other
I can think of things to do.
Right. Well, but to make money, I mean, except for going surfing, so if you've got an expertise there, it's not a huge market there. So it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting question, and a lot of it goes on, obviously, in Silicon Valley. But
and the NDAs that Apple puts together are there's not one-page NDAs. I mean,
right.
NDAs that comprehend or try to comprehend literally every circumstance an ex-employee might find themselves in, and I mean to me it's a kind of a remnant of the Jobs era where that Jobs felt very strongly about protecting secrets, whether it was secrets that would protect Apple or secrets that might be damaging to Apple. So it's just interesting to me that on the forced labor piece, to your comment, Rob, that they've kind of taken kind of a bit of a. I just don't get that because it is a bad look for the company, and they need to confront that issue. I mean, it's a problem.
It's not the first time corporate management has just been completely unable to read the room.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's extra expense and it's extra trouble. People are lazy. If I have to change factories, if I have to renegotiate with, authorities in a different country, that's work for me. And these people do not want to do work, right? So if you're going to make them work, of course they're against it, whether it's the right thing or not.
I think, John, you used a phrase a few weeks ago when we were talking about this orthogonally. It was something about it's all about the Benjamins, right? It's about market share and market access to a very
I'm sure
large
Apple
market.
does not want to have further awkward conversations about its relationship with the government of the People's Republic of China.
Right.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yep. Well, let's hit the next topic, and then this is right in your wheelhouse, Rob. It sounds like a Rocky sequel. The 5G C-band issue versus the FCC. So talk to the audience about what.
In this case, Rocky is running up the Capitol steps for exercise, not the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So here we have an intersection of two different federal priorities. One is, decades of effort to try to expand the availability of broadband, which includes finding spectrum that you can free up and refarm into mobile broadband use. And this has been going on for the last 10 years or so. And so in this case, this involved taking some frequencies that were previously used by a lot of satellites. If you remember the really big satellite dishes, C-band dishes, using that and auctioning it off to the wireless carriers. They had this auction at the start of the year. AT&T and Verizon bid tens of billions of dollars combined to get the spectrum with the idea they would be able to use it. You're supposed to have an interagency collaboration to make sure that all the existing stakeholders will be okay with that. That did not seem to happen. And so this has run headlong into a different federal priority, which is the FAA's determination to preserve the culture of safety in commercial aviation. And so in this case, you have wireless carriers, tech policy types saying, look, 40 other countries have C-band already deployed. It's fine. Why do we have to prove that it's safe? And the FAA is saying, no, that's not how this works. We don't ask somebody to tell the airlines, accept that this will be safe. We can test this over time. We want every day to make the system a little more secure, a little more safe. And so the FAA has said, we cannot verify that this might not cause interference with radio altimeters. And so if nothing else happens, we will issue NOTAMs, notices to air missions, starting January 5th, that saying in certain instrument flight regimes near airports with certain kinds of C-band 5G cell sites, we're going to have to tell pilots that you cannot assume that your altimeter is reporting correct data. And so in that case, you will not be able to, complete the landing there. You'll have to divert to some airport that is not covered by this notice. And that could cause huge, huge problems. What looks like is happening now is at the last minute, the wireless industry and the airlines have agreed to come together and share a lot of data about what is actually at stake, particular models of altimeter, particular transmitters. And it is really complex. And one thing I found is it's not just the US. People have said this could have been avoided if there wasn't this urge to get 5G rolling at all costs. But other countries, Canada, in an equally sort of late-breaking move, regulators have said, we're going to have to impose power limits on 5G. And you can actually look up on a map where you can see around the runways at Toronto International Airport, there's this exclusion zone that extends about a mile off the runways in each direction, and then a sort of precautionary zone where it's limited transmission, which goes out another few miles. And so it's this pretty big X across the suburbs of Toronto where people are going to have less good 5G service.
Right. The Canadian thing was a big important thing. That shows that there is an issue there, because they were claiming, oh, there's no issue, it's fine in all these countries. Yeah. Not exactly.
Yeah, and it turns out that there is a lot of complexity. The Airline Pilots Association sent me this long list. Yes, it's being deployed in all these countries. Here's the power limits that Japan's using. Here's the guard band separating 5G and radio altimeter bands that's so much wider in these various countries in the European Union. And so they're essentially saying, no, there is no market where we have a similar set of facts as in the US, where there's this much gap between the frequencies, that we've actually proven that it's okay.
Right.
Rob, do you anticipate this getting resolved this year? Next year?
I think so. It seems like a manageable thing. I mean, first of all, the airlines, the one point a very smart tech policy guy, Harold Filled with Public Knowledge, made to me, and the piece I did for USA Today was, the airlines are going to get blamed. If your flight gets diverted and you don't get to Atlanta for Christmas, you're going to blame Delta, not AT&T, not Verizon, because normal human beings don't follow these discussions. So the airlines have a strong motivation to get this worked out. AT&T and Verizon, they have a strong motivation because they've spent all this money, and if they don't have C-band, they remain really uncompetitive with T-Mobile, which already has mid-band 5G on lower frequencies that don't have any interference problems. And T-Mobile has got a really good 5G network. that its two older competitors do not have. And C-band is their one way to start addressing this competitiveness gap. So they have an incentive to play ball. So I think things are aligned in the right way. I think this means that if you're an AT&T or Verizon subscriber, you're going to have a crummier 5G experience, but it's the one you know now.
Right.
The least painful option is don't give people something they don't have yet, not cancel a bunch of flights.
Right. Well, the other issue is that the bandwidth that they're using for C, it's so high that you have to put in more towers. So, you need more towers to get more coverage. It makes it so much more problematic than even previous generations of wireless. And I don't know if you guys remember, but I used to have arguments with people saying, well, we should be able to use our wireless devices on the plane when it's taking off. It doesn't interfere, blah, blah, blah. But if you ever used a cellular phone near a not very good FM radio in a car, you could create interference on the FM radio. So you certainly could create interference with the cockpit as they're trying to take the plane off the ground or land it. I think, as Rob, you point out in your article, it's really this when you're landing by instruments, you're flying by instruments because you can't see the ground, or it's foggy or snowy or what have you. It seems like it's a much more serious issue than the wireless industry would lead us to believe.
Well, I'll just kind of wrap it up. It's just a shame that the private sector and the government, they seem to be, not on the same page, and it's a shame because we all agree that it would be nice to move the world to the faster implementation of 5G, but not at the risk of potentially causing safety issues. But hey, what's new in that regard? You have a problem like this, and I just hope it does get resolved sometime next year. So I'm optimistic. I hope you're optimistic about that, guys.
Yeah, I think so.
John, you brought up this. This is kind of the security discussion of the day. Log4j, this new vulnerability that
is it 4J or Forge?
Yeah,
or 4G.
Well, it's for Java, so it's for Java. So it's like, yeah.
So why should we care about this? I mean, this is there's issues that come up like you can't pick a day in the year that there isn't some type of vulnerability that shows its ugly head. But what makes this one unique, and why is this kind of jumping out in the news?
Because it's in Apache in their servers, in their software, and that software is used by, on millions of machines all over the planet. And Apache is, the software that caused a problem at Equifax because the guys at Equifax.
It's a really widely used server system.
Yes.
Right. So they didn't update their patches. They just didn't. And bingo, you had millions of records out there. I got hacked, all my data, credit card information. Thank you very much, Equifax. So this vulnerability is embedded in the software. Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's one of these functions that programmers left in there and nobody was really thinking about. It was a long time ago. It's a logging program that's a pretty fundamental part of these servers to log activity in Java, and everybody uses it. So nobody's really thinking about it, although lots of security people have said over the years, this Java, we should not be using this Java, right? It's very bad. But this is, another example. And trying to patch it is really a hard problem. It turns out to be. Initially, when it was revealed, I thought, oh, you just enter a couple of lines of code, you'll patch it, no problem. But they've done about 4 or 5 patches now, and they don't seem to be able to solve the problem. And every server has to do this too. There's nothing you and I can do about it. I don't have to do anything on my laptop or phone. But the problem is you could use my laptop or my phone for a botnet or any kind of other heinous activity by exploiting this vulnerability. And that's the thing. It's like, wow, they could be breaking into my system and there's nothing I could really do about it. So,
but John, we've talked about this before, and this is the thing that it just floors me. Yeah. And that the point you're making is correct, that there's nothing, it's hey, let's go download the latest version of Norton antivirus and you're okay. I mean, this is at the server level.
Right.
And many of these vulnerabilities happen because for whatever reason, the problem was known, but for whatever reason, they didn't implement the latest patch. They didn't implement the latest a piece of security software at the server level. That happens often, and whether that's incompetence, whether there was a cost issue, whether that was just, whatever reason, there's always lists of issues. That's the thing that I think drives businesses crazy, in that, local businesses are spending tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars trying to address these issues. And, what can they do when this stuff happens at the server level?
Right. And this is an unusual one too, because there's no real individual to blame here. I mean, at Equifax, you could say Equifax is to blame. No question about it. Should they be fined? Absolutely. Should they pay money? Absolutely. But in this case, it's sort of an embedded problem in the software that nobody was really thinking about. And now that it's discovered, solving it, it looked initially to be pretty easy to do, but now it's not. It's clear that it's not quite easy.
It's Heartbleed all over again. It is something that really shouldn't happen in theory. This is open source software, and there's the saying, with enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. And the idea is, if the code is documented, anyone can inspect it and improve it, then stuff like this will get caught. But sometimes it doesn't, because people just assume, oh, this library works fine. Never mind that it turns out it's just a couple of people who are maintaining it. And there have been attempts to improve on that. Google has a really good initiative called Project Zero, where they just look for flaws in code that's supposed to be okay, with the idea that if the community isn't going to provide those eyes to surface those bugs, we'll put paid professionals on it. But yeah, here again was something where, the handful of people working on this project needed more help, and then now they're getting it a little too late.
But before we go to the last topic here, I want to talk about the word that John, you brought up, and Rob, I want your comment on this. Is the whole idea of consequences. There should be a component to this discussion where if a company at the server level, or even at the business level too, but if they fail through negligence, incompetence, there should be a financial consequence to it. That it should hurt enough that, hey, you won't do this again. I mean, do you agree? Rob,
in theory, yes. You don't want poor coding to become lawsuit bait. This can be an expensive way to resolve it. On the other hand, the systems we have right now, was Equifax held very accountable for poor security practices? As someone who got Equifaxed, I would say no. And part of this is not so much a security conversation, but a privacy conversation, because we don't have a federal law covering data breaches. We have ones that cover issues with your health data, your financial data, but just generally, if Equifax leaks your social security number across the internet, it's like, well, that's unfortunate. We're very sorry. Please accept a year of free credit monitoring.
Right.
Well, hey, let's hit this last issue here, because we're going to have some fun with this. I mean,
oh yeah,
John, let me start with you. Did you have plans on going to CES, or are you just waiting for the all clear, or what do you assume is going to happen in Las Vegas in about 3 weeks? Or do you think that it's
2 weeks?
2 weeks. I'm sorry, 2 weeks.
Yeah, less than that.
Yeah. For me, I am I'm slated to go. I have a couple of people that I really am looking forward to talking to on some interesting sort of out there kind of topics. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing them. However, as each hour ticks by, it looks less and less likely that a lot of this is going to happen. And, it's shades of Mobile World Congress and the Geneva Auto Show and all these shows that did exactly the same thing and canceled a day before, or basically went virtual a day or two before the show. And it doesn't matter the size of the show. Nothing's too big to cancel, as we've learned in the last less than 2 years. So, I mean, as one PR person put it to me yesterday, he was trying to arrange for appointments, and he said, I'm basically rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but when would you like to meet with the CEO of this company? And so every day, Hisense today was another one. They've basically canceled. So now you don't have Hisense. What are the TV makers are out? You know, you don't have Amazon. You don't have the T-Mobile guy. He's not even going to appear virtually for his keynote. So whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know. And I'm sort of waiting until after Christmas to make my final decision. But at the moment, I'm supposed to go on. At the moment, I'm very much looking forward to meeting a couple of people there. But when I look at the number of people that are canceling, it's going to be pretty quiet in Las Vegas.
No, I agree. And you know what's interesting is, in all fairness to the CES company and the companies that are going to be there, I mean, they're putting very, very strict rules in place. You have to be, you know, you just can't get in showing that you have a proof that you don't have COVID. You have to be vaccinated. It's one of those type of events. You have to be fully vaccinated.
Right.
Although I don't have they defined what fully vaccinated is? Does that include?
So they have. I was looking this up the other day. The Consumer Technology Association, they have like an actual, real, strict, no exceptions vaccine mandate. You must have completed the full course, not necessarily boosters, but you got to have either your 1 dose of J&J, 2 of Moderna, 2 of Pfizer, or I guess other World Health Organization approved vaccines. You can't cite a medical excuse, certainly not a religious excuse. And if you had COVID before, they don't care. They want to see your vax certificate. And so they're going to check that. You know, they're doing the right things. And they announced these measures a while ago. The last thing they announced was we're going to give everyone a free Abbott Laboratories rapid self-test kit. Although realistically, you should do the self-test like the evening before you head out for Vegas, because what if you test positive when you arrive? Then you're really screwed. You've flown across the country and you're stuck in this hotel room for who knows how long.
Right.
That's a serious issue that hasn't been really addressed, and I need to talk to people next week about that too. For, you know, being stuck in Vegas, it's Vegas. Hello, this isn't like the vaccination capital of the United States exactly. So it's not really. Number of people say, well, I'm nervous about flying, and I'm like, the flight is going to be fine because the people, you know, we've all traveled for work now during this pandemic.
I don't know, JQ, I've seen the numbers in New York. I think you may lower your risk by going to Vegas.
Well, that's the other thing. So our experience here in New York is, you know, that vaccination stuff, it's great. Everybody should be vaccinated. Absolutely get the booster shot. But the fact of the matter is that's not going to stop us. So you've got a lot of people without masks in Las Vegas. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah, so I am also scheduled to fly there, and I probably will, no matter what. I think it's a safe bet that I'll rebook my flights because they're so much cheaper now. Like, there's no reason you just stick with airfares you paid in September or October because they're just crashing through the floor. I think CES is going to happen. Unlike MWC and all the events that got canceled in early 2020, we have vaccines. So the downside is not that you fall prey to this pandemic where we don't even know how it works. But if you've gotten vaccinated and boosted, which is me, then you almost certainly suffer nothing worse than you won't feel any sicker than I usually do every year after going to CES. And when I come home, you know, my wife is vaxxed and boosted. My kid's gotten both doses, 11, so a booster's not an option. Our house is small, but it's big enough. So if I have to just sort of live a quarantine existence for a few days, I can do it. And it seems that the latest variant, would like the series to end, is spreading rapidly enough. We're all going to get it at some point. So to a certain degree, I would like to get it over with in a scenario where I have some control over it. And the other thing is virtual CES last year, this January, was not good. You're watching a series of infomercials. You have no way to there's no hands-on time whatsoever. Just getting basic questions answered about a product is really difficult. So unless you have a company like a Samsung or a Sony saying we're out, I think this proceeds. This isn't like South by Southwest where the local government stepped in. Clark County, Nevada is never going to say, I'm sorry, the show must not go on.
Right. Well, I will say, let me, I'll just, I don't know why we're getting this feedback. But I'll just say this, is that I do think that I went to an event for Calix, which is a big communications company, conducted a channel event that they did back in October. And I wrote about this on Forbes. They really did execute the event in a very, very professional manner. And it was surrealistic going into the casinos. I mean, they have every slot machine, separated by plexiglass. So I know you have a big slot machine addiction, Rob. So you're on mute.
Was
So
this
go ahead.
around?
So it's one of those things that it's just one of those things that I think we're going to have to deal with. And again, unless CES itself cancels the event, I'm going to go, and I'll take all the proper precautions. And as you said, Rob, I think the big problem with all canceling, with doing all these events online, is that you can do this stuff with online meetings, but they turn into a long infomercial, and there's no interaction. You can't answer. You can't really ask direct questions. Everything is through a chat box. You can't go into a bar and bump into someone you haven't talked to in 3 or 4 years and maybe get a piece of information that you would normally not gotten. So anyway, let's see what happens, and hopefully I'll see you two guys out there.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
We'll go there. So anyway, guys, listen, thank you. Let me just thank you for participating in today's podcast. I hope you both guys have a great holiday. Please like the podcast when you get a chance. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if I don't speak to both of you guys before the holidays, please have a great time with your families between now and hopefully CES. And until next time, have a great week.